And we're joining you in Dolan's Dugout on a Sunday night. Steve, thank you for joining me tonight for Dolan's Dugout. Steve, prep basketball. We're going to talk about the state playoff pairings were announced today, and I took in the game this week with El Capitan and Calexico at Sarah High School. They played for the Division IV Boys Championship. We'll also talk a little Aztecs and Padres. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Ramon. Hey, it's great to be with you again. Like you mentioned, my alma mater, El Capitan, did get to the finals in boys basketball. I know you went to the game. Didn't turn out the way we'd hoped in East County, but thought it was a great season for the Vaqueros.
Well, it definitely was, and I think even though they came out on the short end in the championship game, they played a great game. Calexico, just a really nice team for the level of championship that they were playing in Division IV, and turned out to be a terrific team, the Bulldogs. But El Cap gave it all their fight, and I said they had a little bite early on because Calexico jumped out to a lead, Steve, double digits in the first quarter, and it looked like El Capitan might get run out of Sarah's gym, but well, in typical fashion of the way this team has kind of played in their little playoff run, they fought back nicely and closed the gap to within 3 points. They trailed at halftime 33 to 29, but they just had a nice ball game. And Jacob Fitzner, their big star, had a great performance in the championship game with 26 points. He looked pretty sharp on his outside shot. Want to also compliment some of the other El Cap players in the game. Mostly I want to compliment Deshaun Desenor, the sophomore. Deshaun maybe struggled a little bit at the line. I think he would have liked to have done better, but he was so good attacking the rim and helping El Cap get back into that game. Just continually getting rebounds and going up and attacking the basket. He kind of led the charge along with Fitzner. Also, a freshman, Micah Odell, who really kind of came on the scene late and was a big part of their playoff push. He had a couple of blocked shots to help El Cap rally in the first half, and he had a couple of buckets in the first half as well. So even though they're going to lose some of their top players, head coach Elias Toda probably has put this team in pretty good position. He started a nice little, I say start, I mean, Fitzger's been there quite a while, and El Cap, this is really a little bit of a culmination for him. But get this, Steve, Fitzner in his years at El Capitan ended up playing for basically 4 head coaches.
Yeah.
So for El Cap, with a first-year head coach and Elias Toda to end up reaching this championship game, it was a real nice job, and I think everyone was excited. Calexico, they brought all their fans on like 3 buses, pulled the parking lot early. They were there at the game an hour before it started. And, although Cap fans showed out, compliments to the Calexico fans, they might have won the battle of the fans. I hope the Vaquero fans don't get mad at me for saying that. El Cap fans were very loud and boisterous and supportive, but the Calexico fans were really, really on their game, as were the Bulldogs. Really, they had a couple of guys that really took it to El Cap and pulled away in the end, but Fitzner had a big 3 that kind of brought them back into the game in the first half, and Blaze Saez, the other senior on the team, who really, really emerged in the postseason. I say that he's a good player throughout the year, but he had his career performance in the semifinals to help El Cap get to that championship game, and I think the Vaqueros can be proud of their effort this year. Steve, they were the only East County team to reach the championship game, so hats off to the Vaqueros.
Well, Ramon, interesting you say that because my alma mater, El Cap, like you say, was the only East County team to reach the finals. But as you know, state playoffs start this week, and we have several teams going. We have a couple girls teams and a couple boys teams going to the state playoffs. And I know, not to get ahead of ourselves, but of course in the open division we have 2 teams, and like we were talking about before the show, Foothills Christian and Christian, if they both win their first game, they play in the second round. But not to get ahead of ourselves, Ramon, tell me a little bit what's going on as far as the first round of state playoffs. I know they start here in a couple of days.
Yeah, and anybody's interested in going out and checking out some state playoff basketball, there's going to be 2 games in the East County on Tuesday night. So, going to be some high-quality basketball. Let's go ahead and start with those boys first, even though that we do have the 2 girls teams they're playing we'll tell you about. But let's take a look at some of the boys, maybe the highest seeded team of all the East County playoff teams is going to be the Foothills Christian Knights, and they're going to take on LA Salesian in a first-round matchup. The Knights should be pretty heavily favored in this game, and I think they've earned that right. That poll came out this week. Foothills Christian Knights probably going to find themselves in the middle of that poll. We'll talk about that final vote coming out tomorrow, maybe how you voted in just a moment. But the Knights will take on Salesian, a winnable game, and I think Foothills Christian poised maybe to do some damage in the state playoffs. They certainly, after ending up losing their first game in the open division, they're probably pretty hungry to get a win or 2 or more. Who knows? This is definitely a high-quality team. And in Division 2, I think Foothills Christian could possibly make some type of special run in the playoffs with Yassine Garam leading the way, and they have some other talented players. Maybe some players will kind of emerge for Foothills Christian in this next game or 2. We know that they have some familiar faces to a lot of basketball fans, but maybe one of these younger players will emerge, like Darian Carter-Hollinger possibly stepping up. So should be exciting there. And we also have a road team from the open division as well. We know Christian also lost their first round game, but they're going to take on Roosevelt High. And I think that's probably a winnable game right there. Christian's going to be an underdog in that game, but just look at the tough teams they played. And really, they only had a handful of losses, and they were all to the elite teams in San Diego. So they're going to have to go on the road. But I think with Kobe Sanders, Pat Roberts, I think this team could get a win against Roosevelt. And as you mentioned, Steve, should Christian upset Roosevelt, obviously it would be an upset, 11 against 6.
Sure.
They would play Foothills Christian. And that'd be really interesting. You might remember 2 years ago, Christian played a memorable state playoff game with the Mount Miguel Matadors in the Matadors gym that people might remember was a thrilling game. Maybe it was the game of the year that year. But I think it'd be real neat to see Christian and Foothills Christian play at Cuyamaca College in a boys state second-round game. So I'm going to pull for the Patriots. I think Foothills Christian will get it done in their game, but pull hard for the Patriots, and let's get 2 of our East County teams playing each other in the second round. Steve, we're also going to have another home game on the girls' side, and look at this. Mount Miguel.
Oh, yeah.
West Covina at home Tuesday night, and great job. Hey, Mount Miguel, if they can start off with the victory, they got a very, very young team. I think this is going to be a tougher game. I mean, it's an 8-9. So,
sure.
Obviously with the home court edge, maybe Mount Miguel is expected to win. But I looked at the matchup. It's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. And Mount Miguel, their youthful team, they're going to kind of learn and grow quickly right here. This is an important game, I think, not only for, you want to win a state playoff game. You have to go on the road. That'll be great. But I think this is an important game for this group of kids because, like we've talked about all year, they've got 3 freshmen that are kind of leading the way for this team. They also have some veterans on the team. But I think moving forward in the future, this is an important game, win or lose. If they win this one, obviously the next game is important too. They're going to gain some necessary playoff experience. This team is set up, Steve, for great success for the next 3 years. Once again, Robbie Sandoval has done it again, kept this program going, and they were rewarded with a home playoff game. So that's very interesting because I think last year they actually were on the road in their state playoff game. So also a game in a higher division I just want to mention because that was the home game, but the Christian High and Lady Patriots are going to go on the road to take on King High of Riverside. And interesting, Steve, this is a rematch from last year in the state playoff. And King beat Christian last year 64-46. I think this is a tough matchup again for Christian, but the familiarity factor is going to be there for the Lady Patriots, and I think that could help them. I kind of wish they would have gotten a different matchup, a different opponent.
Sure.
They're going to have to get over this hurdle and basically turn around what was an 18-point loss last year to King of Riverside. They can do it, but they're going to have to play better than they did in that game last year. I don't think scoring under 50 points is going to do it.
Wow. No, and Ramon, it's interesting. Now, we talk quite a bit about the state playoffs. One thing, looking back, now, again, CIF just ended last night, Saturday night, the finals. You and I both voted in the top 10 poll all year for the San Diego Union Tribune. If you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot first. Have you voted your top 10 yet?
Yeah. And I don't know, Steve, you look at the way the season played out, and I know that some people were picking, Saints maybe to win it, maybe Cathedral.
Sure.
And the Cathedral Catholic gone for my number one team. Last week, or 2 weeks ago before the playoffs started, they got 12 of the 13 votes. They'll obviously get all 13.
Oh, yeah. They better.
No problem to the one voter that voted Torrey Pines number one before the playoffs started, because I think Torrey Pines made a great account of themselves throughout the postseason. They ended up in that championship game against Cathedral Catholic. It wasn't Saints, it wasn't Parker, it wasn't Foothills, it wasn't Christian, it was Torrey Pines. And Torrey Pines was my number 2 team. I voted Saints number 3. Then maybe this is where, I don't know what you voted, I'll give you mine, but I had Francis Parker 4th, Christian 5th, Foothills Christian 6th, followed by Mater Dei Catholic. I think Poway was the team that was kind of in the poll before the playoffs started, and they were one and done with their matchup, but they lost so convincingly in the first round that I removed them from the poll, and I just voted the 3 champions of the top 3 divisions after the open division as numbers 8, 9, and 10. All great teams. Santa Fe Christian number 8, San Diego High School. Wow, Steve, credit to the Cavers. 3 straight championships for the Cavers. AJ Bergen, 3-time champion player for the Cavers. And I voted San Ysidro, number 10. I know they had, quite a few losses this year, but boy, they were just such a great story. And, in this day and age where teams are kind of, importing players or getting transfers, San Ysidro and Mikey Williams, I mean, there's kind of some homegrown talent. Credit to Williams for playing for, his hometown school, I guess, San Ysidro, and that team, I voted them number 10, and they're obviously going to have some big, big years ahead of them. So I don't know what you did, but I just think the little mix in there, I think the voters have a bit of a jumble when it comes maybe 4, 5, 6, and on down. So I'll just be interested to see how it holds out tomorrow.
Well, it's funny because we went to top 6 in the same order. Obviously, I took Cathedral Catholic number 1 and Torrey Pines number 2 for the obvious reason that they played in the championship game. And I went with the Saints number 3 and Francis Parker number 4, the 2 teams that got to the semifinals in the open division. And then I went with Christian 5 and Foothills Christian 6. I did put Santa Fe Christian up 7, which may have been a little bit high for them. Then I went Mater Dei 8, and I actually went 9 with San Ysidro. I liked what they did this year. 10, I couldn't decide. I flipped a coin. I took Poway over San Diego. Maybe not the right thing to do, but Poway, won 9 or 10 games in a row before the playoffs. Yeah, Torrey Pines beat him by 31, so that was something that really weighed on my mind. But again, polls are tricky. I will say, though, one thing I like about the final poll is everything's all played out. I'll tell you what, like, for instance, I don't know about you, I'm actually in the baseball poll, too. The hard part is early in the season, not so much in baseball, like in football and basketball. Our teams oftentimes are playing teams from out of state or out of the county, and it's just really hard to compare apples to oranges. But again, the thing I like about that final poll, finally we're comparing apples to apples. So I think, again, you and I, Ramon, saw things pretty much the same. Of course, on the subject of boys basketball, as you know, some very sad news this past week out of Mount McGill, too. I was really sorry to hear about what happened out there with a coach who was only 47 years old.
Yeah, Steve, Jay Rowlett,
Yeah,
the former head coach of the Mount Miguel Matadors, longtime head coach of the Mount Miguel Matadors, 13 years. He won 229 ball games for Mount Miguel and really put this program, on the map. I mean, Mount Miguel has had a very, very strong boys basketball program under Rowlett, nearly year in and year out. Steve, Jay led the Matadors to two CIF championships, and you
yeah,
really have to almost, there's only a handful of coaches that, you know, that have won multiple CIF championships in the East County. You think of, legends like Brad Leaf and Wade Vickery, John Singer, but
sure.
uh, Rowlett, two championships, and that right now is just not getting done by any coaches really out here. Like I said, other than Coach Leaf, as far as in this century. So Jay's going to be missed. He resigned this year suddenly after the Matadors had a very, very poor start. He was replaced by AJ Stanford, who was a player actually on that first CIF championship team. Gosh, I want to say it was 2010 or 11 when they won the championship, when they won the first championship. And interestingly, on that team, Steve was current NFL wide receiver Bryant Mitchell was a player
Yeah,
on that team, and Bryant tweeted out just a few hours after the news started to spread of Coach Rowlett's passing about how much he meant to Bryant as a head coach. And Mitchell certainly, kind of parlayed his athletic career into now an NFL career. He really has gone through the rigors of professional sports, fighting through, the CFL and getting to the NFL. And he was on that first championship team. Mount Miguel won that first championship in dramatic fashion. And then they won their second championship in triple overtime just a couple of
yeah,
years ago. I think it was 2 seasons ago. So Jay Rowlett, always a great quote. I can remember covering many games of his throughout the years. He almost kind of came on the scene the same time as Coach Sandoval. They were longtime roommates. They might still have been. I think they were roommates.
I think they were. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and probably has shared a lot of basketball knowledge together. I was stunned when Coach Rowlett resigned, and looking back, maybe he was not feeling that well, and seeing the description of, how he did not feel well over the past few weeks. So maybe his health concerns kind of led to him stepping down, and just sad that he maybe was in some pain, just judging from the description that Coach Robbie had. Quotes by John Maffey in the story this week that described, his passing. So I'm sorry that Jay was in some pain leading up, but I think his legacy is set. He did a great job and will be remembered as one of the greatest coaches in East County history. That's a fact.
yeah, definitely. Heartfelt prayers and thoughts go out to Jay and, of course, the whole Mount Miguel community. We're really sorry for what's happened out there, Ramon. And it's never easy to transition from a story like that, but if we could stay in on the topic of basketball, as you know, this coming week, San Diego State now is in the Mountain West tournament. I mean, just last night, coming back from 13 points down in the second half to beat Nevada. That seems to be the story of this team's season: is get down early, come back late, and win. If I could just go through real quickly what their schedule will be this week in the tournament. On Thursday at 11:30 in the morning, San Diego State will play the winner of a play-in game between Fresno State and Air Force. Of course, the Aztecs beat Fresno State twice way back in early January and only played Air Force once at Air Force and beat them there. If San Diego State wins that game, which will be a big favorite to do so, on Friday, the semifinal game could be very interesting because San Diego State would play the winner of Boise State against UNLV. And as you know, the couple things about it: if it is UNLV, number one, UNLV is the only team to have beaten San Diego State, and number two, the game will be at UNLV. And if the Aztecs by chance get through that, then there could be several teams from the other side of the bracket, most likely Utah State. But again, to me, the focus, and you never want to look ahead. Nothing says they'll win that first game, but if they do, like they've done every year so far in the Mountain West tournament, then it's most likely UNLV. And what concerns me about UNLV, not just that they were the only team to beat the Aztecs, beat them by 3 here at Viejas Arena, but also only lost by 4 at UNLV against the Aztecs. And again, this game will be on the Rebels' court if it gets to these two teams. And that's what's concerning, is the fact that San Diego State has not done well either game against Las Vegas. So theoretically, the Aztecs may not get to the Mountain West tournament final. I think they will. They pretty much do every year, but there's always that possibility. But I don't know. What do you think of the whole thing?
Okay, Steve. Well, I kind of want to dial back a little bit to that loss against UNLV, right? I don't know if there was just something in the back of the minds of this team, the way they played against the Rebels, the way they played against the Rams in their next game, and the way they played against Nevada in the first half, that kind of said, when you're playing for a situation like they're in, all the talk about having to go be a number 1 seed in the East, or can they dial it back and be a number 2 seed in the West? What do they want? What do they need? I don't know if that played a factor in that loss to UNLV, but I mentioned to you, I said, you know what, I had the Aztecs graded higher than most during the winning streak, and then I dialed it back after the loss and said that concerned me, and I think that little streak concerned me, the UNLV, the Colorado State, the first half against Nevada. But you know what, Steve, what happened? Well, against Nevada, what did they do in the second half? Once again, something they've done half a dozen times during this winning streak, and that's fighting, struggling a bit in the first half, the other team hanging around, and then boom, just like that, a double-digit deficit turned into a big lead against the Wolfpack, and it was so fast and swift and impressive. That's the Aztec team right there that we saw in the second half that is a national title contender. And I think shame on you for talking about not being able to reach the Mountain West Conference Championship, but
they always do. They always do, though.
Right? So, if there is a slip up somewhere in this tournament, I think it would result in San Diego State being a number 2 seed out west. So, yeah, they don't want to. They don't want that. They want this championship, and an impressive run may still land them a number 1 seed. Mick McGrain tweeted something. Our old colleague, and your friend, he tweeted something this week I thought was interesting. He said, he remembered Coach Dutch talking about the rigors of the road in the Mountain West Conference, and that, as tough as the other conferences have it because of the, the elite level, maybe of the Power 5 or the top level of Power 5 conferences, is there really any tougher conference as far as, travel is concerned than the Mountain West, if you can get through that? So, all these games are played. The thing about a tournament like this is, yes, upsets happen. We see it all the time. But when they play the back-to-back-to-backs, usually super elite teams really excel in situations like that. And I think given the class of San Diego State against the rest of the Mountain West, I'm calling them super elite in comparison to all their opponents in this tournament. Nobody really matches up with them. As great as Nevada's been, look what they did in that game, against Nevada, especially against Jalen Harris. He still had the 24 points, but I think they really did a good job on him in the second half. And kind of led, what can you say about Malachi Flynn? He got the, I think it was Conference Player of the Week honors again, 36 points in that game. That performance, Steve, that was a performance of a National Player of the Year, to be quite honest.
Oh, absolutely, Roman. I think there's no doubt that Malachi Flynn is the Mountain West Player of the Year. I think that I think Matt Mitchell also should be a first teamer in the Mountain West. He'll start the year as the number 6 man coming off the bench. Then when Joel Mensah, went out with a respiratory problem, that Matt Mitchell's come in and started like he'd done before the previous season. He's just been outstanding. But Ramon, I guess one thing, it's funny when you talk about Malachi Flynn, and it's a question that who cares until later, but there's a good chance he may go to the NBA next year. Right now there's talk he could be a late first round pick. And if he does, and all three of the transfers who've really done well this year, him, Yanni Wetzel, KJ Fagan, would all be gone because the other two guys are already seniors. But again, that's one of those things worry about down the road. Couple things on the Mountain West. Number one, going back to the tournament, I think even if the Aztecs were to lose in the first game, the quarterfinals against Air Force or Fresno State, I don't see that happening. Even if it did, they'd be no worse than the number 2 seed. I think even if they lost on Friday in the semis, no worse than the 2. And if they even get to the Mountain West finals, I think they'll still be a number 1 seed. But I want to go back to something that you talked about too on the elevation in the Mountain West. Places you play, outside, okay, UNLV, not so much, but, 2/3 of the schools that you play at on the road are 4,000 feet or higher. To bring it into perspective, here in San Diego County, we think of Julian being way up there in the mountains. Well, if Julian was in the Mountain West, it would be one of the lowest elevations, to put it into perspective. And then you've got, Wyoming at over 7,000 feet. I believe Air Force also. So it's just travel-wise. I've traveled in that conference before. I can remember one time years ago when now you go one game, you go game by game. It used to be, remember one time, we've had 3 games were played. Wyoming, Colorado State, and Air Force spent 6 days at that altitude, and oh my gosh, couldn't wait to get home. But anyway, I just think, and again, for San Diego State to be undefeated on the road and on neutral sites this year, that's just something that's unprecedented. I just really think, again, that the Aztecs, no matter what happens in the Mountain West tournament, I've been saying this all year, no matter what happens in the Mountain West tournament or what happened in the Mountain West, as great as it's been, the season really starts on March 19th or 20th when this team will have its first game in the NCAA tournament, because I think that's what this team will really be remembered by.
Yeah, and just to go back to, what Mick, was tweeting about, Coach Dutcher, because Coach Dutcher, I didn't kind of finish my point, but what Coach Dutcher told Mick was he was amazed that any team could survive the road in the Mountain West, and this team, Steve, set a school record with 12 straight road wins in this conference. When I look at teams, and I love to handicap sporting events, it's like my favorite hobby.
Yeah, I know.
Favorite passion. And when I look at teams when I look at teams and I'm looking to win championships, I look at the road record. That's the first place I go. That's the sign. That's the true test of a team. I'm not saying that anybody can win at home, but teams that don't win at home and win on the road, sometimes those are the teams that can surprise. And any team that can do both, that's an instant championship contender. So not only do they have, first team All-American, I'll just say it right now. He's going to be there. Malachi Flynn. Yes, I think that he will turn pro following this season. That's my gut feel, especially if he can get first round money. You said late first round. I haven't projected even higher, but I think that would come, after seeing, they have combines and everything like that. And I think he will excel at that. And I think that this is what, I don't know if he could be a starter in the NBA, but I think he could be a contributor and maybe an instant contributor to a team with a few, with rookie minutes early, but maybe building a career as a professional. But I'll tell you this, Steve, also, how about the Naismith Coach of the Year? I think that's what Mick kind of predicted, and I kind of agree. Wouldn't that be amazing, Brian Dutcher? I'm sure Coach Fisher is just tremendously proud of Dutch and what has occurred this year, and we're all excited. I can't wait. This week's going to be great. I'm looking forward to these games, but I'm really looking forward to the NCAA tournament games. Like I said, we're going to have several games where it'll just be 2 hours of probably edge of your seat thrills when we get to get to those key games. I'm talking about, we already talked about on our show, Sweet 16, maybe Elite 8. And hey, like I said, I can sit here and predict that San Diego State's going to go all the way to the national championship game, but it's not far-fetched. It's definitely achievable. This team matches up with those guys. You mentioned them, especially, reaching down past those two seniors, Fagan and Wetzel, but also past Flynn, Shackle. Hey, we talk about Matt Mitchell and the great play that he's had, and he hit that big three-pointer that kind of keyed that early run in the third quarter, but how about the way Shackle played in that game and the way he's kind of, played in these last couple victories too? I think he's playing his best basketball right at the right time. And also Seiko and Pulliam have definitely been playing well. I think that's important because this team might not be as deep as some of those teams, but if they can get big contributions from Seiko and Pulliam, I think that's going to help.
Definitely agree, Moni. And as you know, Selection Sunday is 2 weeks from today, so we'll know come Sunday on March 15th, we'll know when and where the Aztecs are playing and go from there. But, one other team in town that's winning right now, I mean, the games don't matter, but the San Diego Padres are on a 6-game winning streak. They're 7-1 in spring training. Here's my thought on that. I don't know that I like that in spring training. I've always said in spring training, I want my team to finish 500 because if you lose too much, it's kind of like, oh, no. And if you win too much, it's kind of like, well, when does it lose? You're always going to have losing streaks in baseball. Hopefully you don't win all spring and then lose when it counts. But, so far so good. And again, the biggest thing has been the pitching. I mean, 2 straight shutouts and, went earlier last week. And this team has really looked good on the mound so far. I mean, that's certainly going to be a strength this year. And so far, so good on that. What's been your take on spring so far?
Well, when we previewed spring training and we talked about what may occur, I think we kind of didn't give it the credit. I just think that if any team is primed for a strong spring training, it might be this Padres team, right? So I don't want to overhype it and say, well, it's just spring training. I think the Padres were set up pretty good to have a strong spring training. Looking back at it now, it's easy to say because they're 7-1. But you mentioned the pitching. I watched that Angels game entirely, and look, Steve, the Padres have a lot of guys on this roster that are competing for major league jobs that are not going to be on the team come opening day. So that makes them real tough team, I think, out in Arizona because they have guys like Barraclaws on the pitching in that game I saw against the Angels. These are guys who are major league pitchers, pitch in the major leagues. That might not be on the team. He might make it, but just looking at the depth of the team, I think they were kind of primed for a strong spring training. So I'm not gonna start to say, okay, let me go this direction. How about surprise team alert, right? The Padres over under, I've talked about it before. Right now they're hovering, I think they said 82.5, 83 wins. So when we talked about it, I said, boy, that seems a little far-fetched, and I'm going to go as far as to say I still think finishing over 500 would be an accomplishment for this team. Now, that's not to say that this isn't a good club, because they are. It's just that because they're in the division with the Dodgers, that is where I think the losses could end up coming. That's going to prevent them possibly from finishing over 500. But I will say this, that if the Padres can finish over 500, and the more wins, this is tough, the more wins that they can put up against the Dodgers, which really ends up being like 2 wins. You talk about the old, when you play the team that you're chasing kind of thing.
Yeah.
If the Padres, I'm not putting them in second. I mean, I still like maybe Arizona ahead of the Padres, but maybe those teams are a little more even than I'm giving them credit for. So for every game that the Padres finish above 500, I think it's going to be one less victory for the Dodgers. Those are going to be the key games, and that's great. That's great for the fans. Those games are all going to be great and exciting. Let's not go out there like that opening day game where they beat us a couple years ago, 14-3 or 1 or whatever it was. But that's where the Padres – and look, maybe we're fighting for a wild card spot, but if they could just move up, if they can get that 82nd victory, that 83rd victory, the Dodgers are going to come back down a little bit. That's where they want to look to get those wins and try to contend possibly for a wild card. Will Myers, the subject of many a bashing on Twitter. He hit that big home run. He had the bat flip. Everyone's going crazy. And look, if Will's playing, I don't know. I think he might be playing with putting pressure on himself, and that might be a good thing. But it might be the kind of pressure that, he's saying, hey, these guys almost kicked me to the curb. These guys almost wanted to deal me, and I have something to prove. And if I get my chance, maybe this is the type of lineup where he could actually do something. I'm concerned because is Manny going to be that? He's not the type of a guy that can carry you, for a couple of weeks in August. That's a fact. Manny's the type of player that might be kind of a fast starter in a situation like this. Looking good in spring training, looking good early on. He's had mixed results actually early in the season, but I think as he's gotten older, he's looked good early. So can Manny Machado sustain it? The tough thing to hear is because Manny, if you look, Fernando Tatis is our favorite star, right? He's the kind of the young face of the franchise, but the team still has to rely on Manny Machado to be the superstar player. And he's going to have to be the one to have a great season if the Padres are going to, overachieve and get to where we want them to be. And can Manny do that? He can, but again, can he carry a team for 2 weeks in August? That's where my concerns would be. But I expect a fast start this time from Machado.
Yeah, I think part of it with Machado too, Ramon, versus last year. I mean, last year he didn't even sign until training camp started. He spent all the winter, traveling, going different places where he figured out where he's going to be. And then he ends out in San Diego. But this year, he had a normal off season. I think that will help him, especially at the start. And I wanted to talk also. You talked earlier about Will Myers. So far in spring training, Will's batting .308. He's got a couple home runs. Yeah, I think he's a lot more determined. And then, there's two ways to look at it. Number one, maybe he'll have a better year than we hope in San Diego this year. Or number two, maybe if he has a good spring, then he's more tradable. Who knows? And then another thing, too, I'm speaking of Will, not so much Will Myers, but the position he plays. There are, you talked about earlier, a lot of roster spots up for grabs. I mean, the outfield, of course, Tommy Pham will be in left. It looks like Trent Grisham in center, and probably Myers in right now. But, like you said, there's going to be some guys who don't make this team who are pretty darn good because after the three projected starting outfielders, you got Franchi Cordero, you've got Josh Naylor, and also you've got Juan Lagares, who played for the Mets, who's a Gold Glover, former Gold Glover, who could take over where Manny Margot was as far as being a defensive replacement late in the game. And don't forget Abraham Almonte, who's batting .429 so far in spring training. Also, you go into the infield. Look at, of course, you got Machado at third, Tatis at short, Hosmer at first. Second base, you got, Jurickson, Profar, you got Greg Garcia. Greg's going to make the team. Our East County guy, Greg's going to make the team. But you got Profar, you got Brian Dozier there. And you got Jake Cronenworth, who came from Tampa Bay, who can also play shortstop. Not all of those guys are going to be on the team either. So there are a lot of interesting position battles up for grabs. And again, you're going to have some guys who are major league worthy not make the team this year, which beats the heck out of what you've had a lot of times in past seasons where you were struggling to get enough guys on the roster. And this year, again, there's going to be guys that don't make the roster that either A, are going to get sent to AAA, or B, maybe they'll be part of a trade package, because this team is at a point where, and then of course down the line during the season, as far as from the pitching standpoint, you're probably going to see Mackenzie Gore and Luis Patino. So this team, I don't know that they're ready yet, to win a wild card this year. I think they're ready to at least contend for one. But again, I mean, I don't want to kick it to wait till next year. I think that's ridiculous because we hear that all the time. But I think this team is headed in the right direction finally, and that finally, after 9 straight losing seasons, I think the arrow is starting to point a little bit more up than down, which means 82 wins or more, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe credit. When I mentioned about the Padres as a candidate to have a hot spring training, whenever you get a first-year manager going to want to try to come in and make a good impression, the Padres have thrown out some pretty decent lineups. You mentioned a lot of those guys like Brian Dozier playing in preseason games, playing in exhibition games. So, there's some nice talent out there, and maybe that's carried them. talk about some of the bats, some of the home runs that have occurred, with this team. So, I think the Padres are playing pretty well. I think it's great to get enthusiasm and optimism up, and I think the fans can be, excited for the start of the season. No team's gonna, 7-1 in exhibition season. That's something to get a little bit pumped up about. Not going to get overly excited, but I think they're going to try hard to have a strong spring, and wouldn't be surprised if they finished with single-digit losses in spring training.
Well, Ramon, hey, I want to thank you for being with me today. We've covered a lot. Just, again, to recap what's going on this coming week, of course, we have the state playoffs starting in prep basketball. We have San Diego State in the Mountain West tournament this week. And like we mentioned, the Padres are still in spring training. Next TV game will be Tuesday at noon against the Milwaukee Brewers. So we got a whole lot coming up this week. So we've had a lot to talk about tonight. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot, if not more than we had tonight, to talk about next week. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, no doubt, Steve. I mean, prep baseball is underway, and we'll talk about that in future shows. We already had, well, look out, Steve. Just start looking at the results. I mean, I got hit by a ton of bricks once baseball and softball started. My production was fine, trying to catch up with these teams, but we already had a matchup of the number 1 and number 2 teams in San Diego just on, I believe it was on Saturday. East Lake knocked off Helix 7-4. That's East Lake, okay? They're number 1.
Yeah, they're good.
It was number 2, so we can start your, we don't have to vote in the poll till next week, but you can almost start your poll right there, and there'll be a ton of results that you have to look at, but just expect, Helix to be right there, and we'll talk about them in prep baseball in the weeks to come.
Well, Ramon, hey, thanks so much for bringing that up, too. And again, thanks so much for being with me tonight. We'll look forward to being back again next week, and want to just wish a good night to everybody out there. And again, a lot going on this week. It should be exciting.
All right. For Steve Dolan, I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.